Welcome to the Configure Price Quote Podcast. My name is Frank Sohn and I'm the founder of CPQ Consulting. This podcast is 100% focused on Configure Price Quote, also known as CPQ, and will provide you useful insights into this topic. My guest today is Julian Hodges, co-founder and CTO at Sneeyeg, a system integrator that was founded in 2022 and is focused on lead to cash to service process on ServiceNow. Julian lives in the UK and has many years of experience as a technology professional and leaders with companies like Amdocs, CloudSense, and Salesforce, among others. And I'm excited to have him on the CPQ podcast. Julian, welcome to the CPQ podcast.
Hello, Frank.
Very excited to have you on the show today, Julian. And let's start by telling me a little bit more about yourself and what you did before you started Sneeyeg.
Okay, so I'm from a little area called the Black Country in the middle of England. For those who know it, it's a Boston place. When I was growing up, I didn't particularly like education, so I didn't do a degree in that kind of formal education. I went into the army, actually. So I was in the army for 9 years in the Royal Dragoon Guards. When I left the army, I went into the software industry where I've been ever since. So I've done a variety of roles, predominantly pre-sales, but also some technical account management, delivery, product management and things of that nature. In terms of the companies that I work for, I really started out in a company called Clarify, which back in the day was one of the big global CRM companies, so competing against Siebel and so on. Clarify was actually sold to a company called Amdocs, which provides, it's again a global software and services company, mostly in the telecommunications industry. And in there I worked across BSS and OSS, so customer management, order management, service management, those kind of domains. I was there for about 10 years. Then I moved to a startup called CloudSense, which did a similar kind of thing. So it was CPQ and order management, but on the Salesforce platform. And I was there for 11 years. And then I actually went to work for Salesforce itself. I was there for just over a year. And then we started Sneeyeg. And so here I am today.
Excellent. Then let's move on. You've worked across a lot of different industries, right, with complex configuration needs. What's the most surprising or misunderstood challenge when implementing CPQ across these various industries, and how have you helped organizations navigate it?
I'll pick misunderstood there because I've seen this thing many times and it's therefore not surprising to me anymore. But what's very widely misunderstood is rules and rules engines. So it's very, especially in the CPQ world, so it's very common for me to go to a customer or a prospect and them to tell me, look, Julian, you need to demonstrate to me or show me how you can model our 15,000 rules that we've got in this legacy system. Our business depends upon this. And I kind of step back from that because I hear it a lot and I say, we need to think about this and look at it in a bit of a different way. The first thing is, if you really have got 10,000, 15,000 rules, almost certainly nobody in your business actually knows the outcome. There's no intended outcomes from that. There's so much interplay and interdependency that actually you'll almost certainly have unintended consequences. Management becomes almost impossible. So for starters, it's not a good situation to be in. And then secondly, what we often find is by implementing best practices and good modeling techniques using modern CPQ tools, we can actually drive down those legacy volumes of rules by an order of magnitude. And more importantly than both of those things is whenever you've got that situation, don't just think, oh, how do I do rule X or rule Y or rule Z? Look at it from the perspective of what you're trying to achieve as a business. Don't ask yourself how you do the rule. Ask yourself what you want to achieve. And usually that means that you can find different ways or better ways to approach what in the past you were modeling 10,000 rules to achieve. So as an example of that, I worked with a utility company a few years ago where they indeed had lots of scripted rules, many hundreds or thousands. And what they did was change the whole way they did business. Those rules were constructing complex bills of material dynamically, down to the last bolt and the last washer. And what we realised is, why do that? What you actually want to do is put up a small, a medium and a large pallet, which just goes out to the location. and then it's central heating in this case, and that was installed. And so what if you had things left over on the van? You over-provisioned each time, and then you were left off with some things that you put back in the warehouse, and then you didn't need 10,000 rules, you needed 10. And so the whole thing became a lot easier to manage as a result.
Got it. But one thing that I always found was very challenging is to align different teams like sales, engineering, IT, and so on around CPQ initiatives. Is there one leadership lesson that you've learned maybe the hard way when you were trying to align all these different teams?
Mm-hmm. That's an easy question for me to answer, but I had to go through some pain in the early part of my career to kind of realize how important it is. And the answer is actually in the question. You talked about all these different, systems and different teams and so on. There's multiple stakeholders in there, which means multiple challenges, multiple concerns, multiple priorities. And when you need to kind of figure out across all of that, then you have the pain of inertia, you have delays, you have increased project cost, you have increased risk. And so what's important here? Governance. And I on my notes, I've put this in big capital letters. Absolutely. It's something I learned really early on. Governance needs to be nailed right at the beginning of a project, especially when you've got something like you said in the CPQ that cuts across all these different concerns. And that includes things like your escalation routes, who gets to make the decision so that those decisions get made quickly.
Very good tip indeed. Now, before we talk a little bit more about Sneeyeg, one question I ask every guest is, what do you do when you don't work?
Well, running a startup, you work. But I enjoy walking. I love reading. I read pretty much every single day. And then other than that, I dabble when I can, when time permits, in calligraphy, manuscript illumination, that kind of thing. And then more lately, my son has become involved in local politics over the past 3 or 4 months. And so I've been helping him with his campaign and with other aspects of his burgeoning political career. And that's quite interesting as well.
Oh, yeah, I bet. I'm not sure if that's relaxing, right? So, but it's definitely something different. And I think you're the first one who mentions that, right? So wish you lots of luck with that. But anyway, let's switch gears a little bit and let's talk about Sneeyeg, right? So can you tell me what Sneeyeg, what CPQ and pricing related consulting services you offer?
Yes, I mean, fundamentally at this point in time, at least, we're a systems integrator. As you'd expect, we do the kind of things that you'd expect. I suppose you could say like a mini Accenture or Deloitte. Mm. So we deliver projects. That's the kind of core of our business. But then we also can do like general consulting, like best practice consulting and things of that nature, enablement for our customers. But the core of it is your traditional project implementation.
Mm. And what teams, CPQ vendors, do you work with?
We work entirely with ServiceNow. Now, given ServiceNow's recent acquisition of Logik, that now includes Logik, but it's all ServiceNow oriented.
Excellent. So the industries that you focus on is obviously telcos, right? So anything else in addition to that?
Yeah, it's telcos and technology, and then also utilities. So those are our three. Okay. In our time, we've worked on many different verticals, but 90% plus of our experience, our expertise, our differentiation is around those three verticals.
Got it. And what company size do you typically work with?
Well, given we're operating in the ServiceNow ecosystem, by definition, that's not going to be, 10-man outfits, generally speaking. And our background is large enterprises. So myself personally, it's the likes of BT and Telefonica and Liberty Global and Deutsche Telekom. It's those kind of companies that the people in Sneeyeg have worked on. And that's reflecting actually now today. And we do business with those large national, regional and global operators.
Got it. And given that you're based in Europe, I guess your focus right now is in Europe. Is that correct?
Well, when we started the company, we thought that was going to be the case. We thought that we'd be very UK heavy to begin with, and maybe starting to work into Europe. What's actually happened is what's become way more important than geography for us in our market, in our customer base, is what we can do. So our expertise, our domain knowledge, our skills are really way more important than geography. So already, even now, we have customers in North, as well as UK, Europe, also North America, and even prospects now emerging in Asia Pacific, although that's more of an outlier. So we are definitely operating as a global company already today.
And let me ask this also. So you do all these projects remote, or you're going on site when you're outside of Europe?
It's a mix.
Yeah.
So I mean, you know what it's like nowadays. Since COVID, people are more anyway accustomed to working remotely. But we typically find on a project that, depending upon the nature of the project, that we'll want key people to go at key times in the project life cycle to be on site wherever it is, and we're able to do that.
Yeah, got it. And how many people does Sneeyeg have at this time?
Today, I think we're on 20. We've grown from 4 a couple of years ago, so now we're on about 20. But we're hiring people. Every month or so, we'll hire another person, another couple of people through organic growth. So 20 today.
Okay, got it. Excellent. And do you offer any proprietary products also for your customers?
Today, we're entirely services. We're organically building a viable business. We have done that. However, and that's likely to be the case for the near to mid-term. However, our backgrounds are all very strong in product. As per what I was saying before, I've worked for decades in independent software vendors. And we'd like to leverage that expertise in future. We're obviously aware that when we come to sell the company, to exit, that the multipliers for a services company might be 1.5, 2.5, whereas for a product company, a successful one, you could be 5, 6, 7, 10, 12 even, So there's obviously incentive for us to move, and the ability for us from a skills perspective to move in that direction over time. Beyond that, though, and we do have ideas for that, by the way. I won't go into them today, but we're already working on that in the background. We also do ServiceNow productization on behalf of other ISVs because we know how to do it. We know what it needs. And an example of that is Aria Systems, which I think we're going to talk a little bit about later on.
Got it. And since you already mentioned the partnerships a little bit, let's dig a little bit deeper into this, right? So you mentioned Aria and you mentioned Logik. Let's talk about these partnerships and any others which you think are important for potential customers of Sneeyeg.
Well, so ServiceNow is obviously our key partner. It's our main channel to market. Obviously, they've got a global sales organization. We're a small company. We have a couple of people who are effectively involved in sales. And so we put a lot of investment into cultivating, that relationship with ServiceNow. And that's the main thing. What we've done aside from that, though, is as ServiceNow has gone sort of leftwards in the business process and northwards in the stack, I mean into CRM territory, so CPQ and CRM and other aspects of customer management, customer experience, which is our domain of expertise. So what we've done is identified various other players, other ISVs and indeed SIs, but other ISVs that are in that space. So, for example, we're a partner of Tenon, who are a provider of marketing solutions on ServiceNow, 3C Logik, who do contact center on ServiceNow, and I've already spoken about Aria. So we're always on the lookout for those kind of partners to go to market with them and potentially deliver their projects, but also we incorporate their capabilities into our reference implementation. So we can use that to educate customers on the broader and what the wider and deeper customer management oriented capabilities that's now available in the ServiceNow ecosystem.
Now I have to ask you a question. It may be a little bit too early since the ServiceNow Logik acquisition hasn't really legally closed yet, right? So I think that will be later in the summer. And then I will also have guests from both ServiceNow and Logik on the podcast. But what I want to ask you is if you can already see some indications, what, if anything, will change for you after this transaction closes? You have already any idea, any expectations that you're ready to share?
Yes, I can. So we already engage with Logik before the acquisition. About a year ago or so, we started to talk to them. Obviously, they're CPQ. We're experts in CPQ. We love the product from the first 10 minutes of looking at it. We got it. We appreciated the sophistication and the capability that was there. Now, when it was an independent, completely, I mean, it still is, notionally, but when it was completely disconnected from ServiceNow, it was tricky for us to position it. When should we pitch it to customers? Is it competitive somewhat with ServiceNow's own native CPQ offering? We didn't see sales teams bringing it in, really. So it was a bit of a tricky situation. But already now, that acquisition is on the cards, it's become much easier. It's already much easier for us to have those discussions with ServiceNow product management and Logik product management. We're already talking to customers about Logik and about its capabilities. So the whole thing is really much more greased and easy for us to do business. And for our prospects, for our customers, it's easier for them to then go on to get that sophistication that in our market is really needed from a CPQ.
Hello, everyone. If you have any questions concerning CPQ, consider contacting us at info@novocpq.com because we help customers with all kinds of questions related to CPQ. So we're involved in customer projects and we provide industry analyst services. So let me give you 2 examples on what helps a lot of customers regularly and see if that would be a help to you. The number one is we help customers find the right CPQ solution for them. We do that for customers of all sizes in all industries. I've been working in the industry since '96, and we help you to find the right solution. We do that with one-on-one meetings and projects, but we also do that through written reports. So we have the CPQ analyst report is our latest report. We currently have 6 and we'll soon have 7 available. And then throughout the year, we're striving to have around 20, hopefully more by the end of the year, and there will be even more reports. And we also help customers to stay up to date with what's happening in the CPQ world. If you already have a solution and you want to see what's new, we have a subscription that offers a number of hours and a monthly newsletter that shows what's happening in the CPQ space. It's our CPQ Circle subscription. If you have any questions about this, send us an email at info@novocpq.com. And you mentioned Aria a little bit earlier. That's why I want to follow up on this one. How do you work with them?
Yeah, well, Aria is one of the world's most successful and biggest cloud billing vendors. So we, from our general kind of network backgrounds, we've worked with people that currently work in Aria. Some of us have worked with those in the past and in the same companies. And so we had that network and we were talking to them from day one, when we started this company. And Aria then engaged us to help them productize their integration with ServiceNow, meaning that in ServiceNow terms, that means creating what's called a spoke, an integration spoke, and delivering it on the ServiceNow App Store. So we did that, and the scope of it is covering billing inquiries and billing operations such as disputes and refunds and that kind of thing, all from within ServiceNow's CRM, customer service application, and also catalog and fulfillment integration. So it's a pretty sophisticated and broad integration. And we did everything for that, essentially. It was a turnkey project. So I was the architect on it initially, and we designed it, we built it, we deployed it, did most of the work of deploying it to the App Store, and indeed we were engaged in helping them with their go-to-market. Helping them with some of the collateral and specifying and building out some of their demo flows and things of that nature. So we were able to do that because of our strong product background. We're not just, a development shop.
Got it. Now, one question I have to ask you that's coming up more frequently lately, has always been a topic. Customers would like the implementation costs to be lower, obviously, right? So now a part of that plays is also the customization that you do to the system, right? So and that's why I wanted to ask you as a system integrator, what role does customization play in your implementations and how do you balance it with out-of-the-box functionality?
Well, it's an interesting question, because if I go back in time 20 years or so, it was quite clear cut between what was meant by customization. It generally meant code, versus configuration, which meant declarative. Nowadays, it's not so clear, because low code, no code platforms have really, moved on a hell of a lot since those days. And a lot of what you might have called customization back then is actually now done declaratively through configuration. So what I kind of tend to define it as is divergence from the standard way of going about things, the standard processes, the standard approaches in the platform, in our case, in the ServiceNow platform. And we try to stay close to that. Now, I'll give a shout out to one of my former employees, which I mentioned before, Amdocs. About 20 years ago, I learned about the Amdocs ASOM, Amdocs Standard Operating Model methodology. And that methodology was all about when they were doing a scoping exercise for a customer, they would go in with predefined processes. This is how it works out the box. And as they're doing that requirements and scoping with the customer teams, if the users, if the stakeholders wanted to diversify from that, they asked them to justify it. They pushed back and they said, but why? Why do you need a blue button in the right-hand corner when there's an out-of-the-box one in the bottom left-hand corner that's red? Silly example, but you get the idea. And they did that systematically. And when there was a kind of, and this comes back to my comment on governance as well, and escalation before, when there was some conflict of priority, and then decisions would get made quickly. And through that process, we found benefits, clear benefits. So to your costs point, project costs obviously were limited. The less implementation you need to do, then the less cost is going to be the project. But then equally importantly, ROI in the longer term. So maintenance and management of that solution over time is easier if you're using out the box. If something goes wrong, it's fixed by the vendor, not by yourself. Adoption and not just of the immediate capabilities, but the ones that the software vendor invests in over time is obviously going to be easier and more automatic by staying close to those out-the-box processes. Now, I learned that back then, and it's really sunk in with me. And actually today, Sneeyeg pretty much uses this same methodology. We don't call it the same thing, but we use that very methodology today with our customers for the same reasons.
Excellent. And how much, if I know it's a very fuzzy question, but how long is an average project for you?
So a full-scale project, so as opposed to a consulting exercise, would be typically between 3 to 18 months. And sometimes there are phases, and that's the kind of order of magnitude of it.
And what are the top 3 business requirements you hear from your customers these days?
Yeah, well, obviously tools and technologies change over time. So back in the day, mainframe versus client server, and then SaaS versus on-premise, and then low code, no code, the impact of IoT, social media channels, and nowadays, of course, Gen AI and agentic. But those are just technologies. The fundamentals don't actually change. Now, business is all around the ability for our customers to compete. And from a CPQ perspective, that means 3 things. Time to market. So how quickly can they bring new and evolving products to market to stay competitive? How quickly and how competitively can they do their pricing and differentiate it? It means time to quote and contract. If it takes you 2 months to bring a quote or a contract and your competitor can do it in a day, then clearly they're going to have some wins over you just directly as a result of that. And then thirdly, time and cost of fulfillment. Once you've sold something, your CPQ needs to be able to sell it with all the information that's needed to actually fulfill it efficiently, quickly, and deal with any problems downstream.
Got it. Now let's look at a little bit more on something you mentioned here, also with artificial intelligence, right? So where do your customers ask for AI and CPQ? So not just AI, I know everyone's using ChatGPT or Gemini or whatever, right? So, but in connection with CPQ, where do you see the most customer requirements for it?
Mm-hmm. Well, I've been working with AI and ML for 20 years odd. And then historically, traditional AI, if you like, and ML, it was used in CPQ kind of scenarios for cross-sell, upsell, and retention. Those are the typical core scenarios. The penetration of the market was generally fairly shallow. Not every customer by any means. It wasn't ubiquitous. But of course, nowadays, in the last couple of years, all of a sudden we've got this explosion of Gen AI and agentic AI. And what we're seeing is that the technology, the underlying capability of that technology is actually moving faster than people can keep abreast of it. So faster than the vendors can productize and faster than customers can understand, adopt, and implement. There is nevertheless, though, amongst the customer base, an absolute acute awareness of the magnitude of this change and the importance to their business of this change. And so some of them feel a bit overwhelmed. How do they make time, to do this amongst their day jobs? And so there's a lot of demand for guidance, and from customers. Now, from a CPQ perspective, we will advise them on that. And to be honest, the kind of scenarios that are immediately at hand in the CPQ space are going to be similar kind of things that they were historically, but they'll just be more intelligent and better versions of those cross-sell, upsell, and retention. But in general terms, customers want to know, give me a framework for how to approach AI. In our case, on the ServiceNow platform, how do we go about it? How do we do that adoption? What are the priorities? And that breaks down into what to use from the platform, because the platform itself brings things that you can just switch on. AI search, case summarization, offer summarization, those kind of things that can just be switched on and will just work. And then beyond that, to help them understand how they can innovate, what makes sense that they can bite off chunks using, for example, especially agentic AI capabilities to further innovate and make things that differentiate them from their competition.
Got it. And one thing that you also mentioned is you have been using machine learning and AI for 20 years, and also, I guess, for pricing solutions, right? So price guidance, price optimization. Are you also running just pricing projects, or is it always CPQ?
We, as Sneeyeg and actually as CloudSense, have not done a pure play pricing. It's always for us, it's always in the context of CPQ of some description. Now, that's because in the case of ServiceNow, for example, but also for CloudSense, ServiceNow does not split out its CPQ from its pricing engines, and from a license perspective, it doesn't. So it's always, let's say, one and the same.
But how is it different for you if a customer has more focus on the pricing part than on the configuration part?
Well, there certainly are scenarios in which customers need more than just, let's say, the CPQ and more than just the pricing engine. And so a couple of examples that I've worked with on that. We have a partner called Gorilla, and they produce advanced pricing engine, which works with various verticals, but it's very oriented around, or very valuable for, energy. So where a customer needs to continuously respond to changing market factors in determining their pricing and determining it transparently, this is an engine which is dedicated to that, and that can plug in to ServiceNow's own engine. On the telco side, I've worked with companies like Last Mile Exchange and ConnectBase that specialize in real-time off-net pricing for enterprise telco communications deals. And so there are other examples of this. And in our world, yes, we do engage with these pure play pricing vendors and pricing specialists, but it tends to be always in the context of a CPQ project.
Got it. Makes a lot of sense. So now the last question I have to ask before we close out this session is, how did you come up with this name Sneeyeg? So when I read it the first time, I thought I didn't read it correctly. So how did you come up with that?
Well, when we first started, the four of us started the company, and the other three are Croatians. So it's the price I pay for working with Croatians. I didn't like this name at first, but actually I love it now because everyone asks this question that you just asked. So in other words, it sticks in people's minds. And the story really is that the quick story is that it means snow in Croatian, and snow is a bit of a nickname for ServiceNow because of the stock ticker symbol. So that's kind of the background for it. But I tend to pronounce it wrong, and there's a fine box in our office actually that this is true. I'm not making it up. I have to put €2 in the fine box every time I pronounce it incorrectly. So there you go.
Okay, that's also a methodology on how you learn. That's true. Excellent. So I think that was super interesting, Julian. Now, unfortunately, we're coming to the end of this episode. Hence, my last question: what's a good way for interested listeners to contact you and learn more about Sneeyeg if they want to?
Yeah. So the easiest way is LinkedIn. Look up me direct, Julian Hodges on LinkedIn, or our company page. It's Sneeyeg. It's SNEEYEG, and either of those will get back to you ASAP.
Perfect. And as always, we will have this information in the show notes. Julian, thank you very much for making time for the CPQ podcast today.
Thank you, Frank.
I'd like to thank everyone for listening and hope you learned something interesting today. If you like the podcast, please go ahead and rate it on iTunes or share it with your friends and colleagues. In the meantime, you can find us online at www.novocpq.com. So long, everyone.